Hi, I'm Chris Johnston from Work Visa Lawyers. This is the May 2018 Migration News Update. If you find this video useful, please hit the subscribe button. So I've got a number of topics that I'm going to run through today on developments over the last few months. Certainly been a busy time in terms of migration policy, and so I'll just go through them and make a few comments as we go. So the first piece of news we should probably start with is the introduction of the Skilling Australia Fund. So the Skilling Australia Fund has just recently been passed by Parliament. It hasn't been implemented yet, but it's going to happen very soon. What it involves is a compulsory payment by employers who are looking to sponsor workers towards the Skilling Australia Fund for each application they go ahead with. I'll give you some examples in terms of the sort of money which is expected to be paid. So for the temporary work visa, which is the 482, the payment would be for a business that had a turnover of less than $10 million, the payment would be $1,200 per nomination per year. So as an example, for a 4-year 482 visa, that would be $4,800. There is also a similar calculation for that business if it was going to sponsor someone for a permanent visa. If it's got a turnover of less than $10 million, they would have to pay a one-off payment of $3,000. There's also similarly a calculation for if the business has a turnover of over $10 million, then they have to pay more. For a nomination per year for the 482, they have to pay $1,800. And for the permanent visa, they have to pay a one-off payment of $5,000. In relation to the Skilling Australia Fund, the idea behind it is that the Australian government is going to use that money to go towards the Skilling Australia Fund, which will then pay for training of Australian citizens. I think there's a bit of a problem with the logic behind the Skilling Australia Fund in terms of the calculation or projection as to how much money it's going to raise. I think that the calculation's been based on the sorts of figures or numbers of applications which have previously been lodged in terms of 457s and employer-sponsored permanent visas like the RSMS and ENS. However, the cost of the Skilling Australia Fund is quite high, and so what's actually going to happen is that a lot of applications are probably not going to go ahead simply because of the Skilling Australia Fund. The projected income of the Skilling Australia Fund is $1.2 billion from forward estimates, and I would be guessing that those estimates are going to be out by a lot, maybe 50%, 75%, a very high amount. The reason being for that is that the cost of paying these contributions is going to mean that a lot of employers aren't going to go ahead with the applications in the first place. And perhaps a more sensible approach to the Skilling Australia Fund would have been to make the contributions quite a lot lower, and then there would still have been quite a lot of applications, and they would have raised some money. But as it is, there's a serious risk of the contributions having the negative outcome of both not raising any money and also preventing skilled migration to Australia. So the second topic is work experience requirements for employer-sponsored visas. So from the 18th of March 2018, there was the introduction of new requirements for the 482 visa, which is a brand new visa. It requires 2 years of work experience in the nominated occupation. And even beyond that, it has specific requirements in terms of saying that it will only accept certain types of experience, and that they're not favouring casual employment, and they're not favouring part-time employment. This becomes very difficult because a large percentage of the people trying to apply for these visas might not have that level of experience. And what that means is that there might be less people going ahead with that type of visa. Similarly, for the employer-sponsored visa for permanent residency, which is the RSMS and the ENS, they've also had a work experience requirement imposed on them, which is 3 years of work experience. That definition of work experience isn't as restrictive as the one that's been given for the 482, but it is quite a long time. And so the net effect of both of these requirements is that people that are already in Australia, say on student visas or graduate visas, are going to find it very hard to get enough experience together to go for an employer-sponsored visa. So that's the background. It's not probably a very good move in the short term for the Australian migration program. And what I probably would guess will happen in the next few years is once the numbers come through, there'll be an adjustment. But for the short term, it's going to be very difficult for people who are hoping to apply. News in relation to business visas. So we're talking about the Business Innovation and Investment Program. So that program has been going very strong. The numbers of applicants has been rising every year, and the areas that they've been applying has changed. So there was a very strong focus on the significant investor visa a few years ago, but now we're looking at people going for a range of the visas, including the 188A, which is the business innovation visa for business owners. Then you've got the 188B, which is investment into government funds, and there's still people doing the significant investor as well. So across that program, numbers are strong. And what this has meant is that there is now a closure of nominations for South Australia up until the new financial year. And I think there's also some restrictions in place for some other states as well. And what this is about is that it's effectively a capping of available positions for state sponsorship that has been given out by the federal government. What I'd say is this means that anyone hoping to go for a business innovation or investment visa should be getting everything ready, hoping to apply soon, and be ready for the 1st of July when new positions become available, because you want to get your application in whilst there's new positions available. The other comment on the business innovation and investment visa is that processing times have probably extended a little, so that can be disappointing for applicants, but it seems to be a bit of a pattern across the board. More interesting developments. So there is definitely some strong initiatives from the federal government and also from the South Australian government in relation to developing entrepreneur visas. So there's two different announcements in the last couple of months. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those. So the first one is the Global Talent Visa Scheme, which is a new concept. We don't have all the details. My understanding of it is that it's an entrepreneur type visa, which is going to be built into the 482. So it's going to be a temporary work visa, but with a potential application for permanent residency at the end of it. Within that, there's going to be two streams. So there's going to be an established business stream, and then there's going to be a startup stream. So I think a lot of the excitement or interest in this visa is actually in the startup stream, because internationally and also within Australia, there's a strong recognition that finding young people who can bring innovative ideas and drive growth and drive employment is a very important thing. So the Australian government is looking to get on board that. We're just going to have to watch this space as to what the details of the visa is going to be, and hopefully we'll hear something from the 1st of July. In the lead up to the South Australian election, the Liberal Party announced that they would be partnering with the federal government, if they were elected, to introduce a entrepreneur type visa. It's called a pilot visa program to focus on startups for South Australia. And the Liberal government was elected, and so I understand that they are now in the process of trying to develop this program. There is still not a huge amount of details on it, but I do understand that there is developments going on, and that it's going to be focused on, I suppose you'd call it a boutique, or it's a small number of applications perhaps. It's not going to be on the scale of perhaps some other visa categories, but they are going to be looking at startups and bringing talent into South Australia and nurturing that talent. So it's just a watch this space for this one as well, but I suppose watch our blog. Regional migration. So it's a hot topic. We'll see the debate about it in the papers, and some politicians as well are raising this topic. What we're really talking about, one of the issues here is how to promote growth and migrants to go to regional areas. So that's the issue, and there is a lot of talk about it. Unfortunately, over the last probably 10 years, there's been a progressive number of changes, starting with the introduction of the new business visas, which didn't have any further incentives for people to go to regional or low population growth areas. And also more recently with the changes to the RSMS, which effectively reduce the advantage of the RSMS and mean that the RSMS is very similar to the ENS. These changes, which have come in the streamlining of the visa programs, the overall effect of them has been to reduce incentives for people to go to regional or low population growth Australia. So while there's a lot of talk about helping the regional areas and promoting growth in regional areas, from a policy perspective, it would have to be said that at the moment, I would expect more and more migrants to be moving to the big cities because there's absolutely no incentive for them to do anything else. So if that area is to be addressed, then it's probably going to need some innovation and thought as to how to give incentives to migrants to go to regional areas. And that would, I think it should not just be in the skilled migration area, but it should also be in the business, innovation and investment area as well. So I suppose we'll just have to see how that develops. Immigration numbers. We know that the overall target of or cap of migration numbers for permanent resident places is 190,000 per program year. So that number stays in place, but there have been some things happening in the migration space which have, I suppose, effectively reduced the available positions. So in the skilled migration area, 10,000 of the skilled migration places have been used by the allocation for the New Zealand stream, the 189, which helps New Zealanders get permanent residency. The interesting thing about this is that to qualify for the New Zealand stream, you have to have been in Australia, living in Australia and earning above a certain amount for 4 years. So by allocating those skilled migration places to people from New Zealand who've been here for at least 4 years, we're not actually achieving any additional people coming to Australia or any people bringing anything new in terms of skills, experience or capital, because they've already been here for a long time. So that's one reduction in terms of the 190,000. A further development is that the investor retirement visa is going to lead to a permanent pathway, which is going to be part of the allocation for the contributory parent visa. This is effectively going to have the same sort of result. People that are already in Australia are going and have been here for a considerable amount of time will then get places which were allocated for permanent migration. These are a couple of specific examples. There are also some other developments which have been reversed, so I'll comment on them as well. But the overall pattern seems to be that even perhaps without overtly announcing cuts to the migration program, just by changes and tweaking of how things are done, there is going to be some downward pressures on the numbers. The other thing I would say is that the changes to the employer-sponsored area are going to have a big effect in terms of a drop in numbers. Now, this might not be noticed straight away in this current approaching year. The reason for that would be there's a lot of RSMS applications and ENS applications in the pipeline already. So they might take a while to clear. But going forward, there's certainly going to be a drop in employer-sponsored permanent applications. So that would be another downward pressure on the overall migration numbers. A positive development in the month of April, it was a negative development, and by May it was a positive development. This is the assurance of support changes. There were changes announced in relation to the assurance of support process. What that was going to involve is that there were higher requirements for the income of the person offering the assurance, and the actual assurance or bond that had to be provided also was over doubled. This was announced in April, and there was immediately a very strong reaction from, I suppose, migrant communities, which were upset about the fact they had had applications waiting for years. They understood what the assurance was meant to be, and then the requirements were put up dramatically. Under the requirements, I did a calculation for a potential applicant where their assurance was going to be provided by 2 different assurers, and both of them were partnered and had children. So the equation took into account all those sorts of things. But the result was that under the new income requirements with that scenario, they needed to be able to demonstrate they had a combined income of over $180,000, which is a huge amount of income. So the changes would have had a very negative effect. Anyway, there was a back down on those changes, and now they're not going to be implemented. So for the moment, at least, that's not going to have impact on the contributory parent applications and that are already in the pipeline. To wrap it up for this month, we're getting close to the new migration year. So migration year runs in parallel with the financial year. So from the 1st of July every year, that's when you've got new allocations of positions available for nominations in terms of skilled migration for GSM applications. It's also when the states have new allocations of numbers of nominations that they can make. So it's certainly a time of year where a lot of people are trying to get ready. So what I'd be saying is that anyone out there who is hoping to go for application which falls within the 189, 190, 489 space, they should be getting their skills assessed, English results ready, so that they can hopefully go ahead with an application from the 1st of July. Okay, so I think I've covered quite a bit of territory. If you have any particular topics that you want me to cover in the next migration blog, or if you've got any questions which you need addressed, then don't hesitate to contact me at Work Visa Lawyers. You can get us through info@workvisalawyers.com.au. Look forward to hearing from you, and thank you very much for listening.